So welcome back to our 11th annual nolaILC Information Literacy Forum and our fourth online conference. We're so glad everyone could make it, and we're really excited about the lineup of presentations that we have this year. My name is Haley Black. I am a member of the nolaILC Executive Board. Our chat monitor today is nolaILC Executive Board member Angie Ballas. And so at this time, I'm going to read our land acknowledgement. So we want to start today by acknowledging the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade hub on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bulbancha, a Choctaw term meaning place of many tongues. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. The New Orleans Information Literacy Collective would not only like to acknowledge and honor the indigenous peoples of this land, but we encourage our executive board, presenters, and attendees to shift their approach to land acknowledgements and consider meaningful activities and reparative actions to support Native communities. We ask that over the course of the forum this week that you reflect and carry out in an actionable item. You might consider aiding nations in recovering and controlling their rightful homelands through Native-led organizations such as the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, support and petition on behalf of local tribes in achieving federal recognition. Many tribes in Louisiana, like the United Homa Nation and the Louisiana Band of Choctaw, have state recognition but not federal, which strengthens the tribe's fight for land sovereignty. Follow on social media and or donate to organizations like the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women USA or the Association of American Indian Affairs Repatriation Project, which works to return ancestral remains and sacred objects to their original nations. These are just a few recommendations, but by no means do they encompass all the ways in which you can support Native communities. We encourage you to continue learning and participating as we aim to avoid performativity and work to be equitable and inclusive of all. A link to this land acknowledgement will be placed in the chat with a list of resources to the items mentioned above and can also be found in the footer of the nolaILC website, and we will provide a direct link to the list in the chat now. Here we go. So before we get to today's presenters, there are a couple of housekeeping matters that we need to take care of. We'll have two presenters today who will each speak for about half an hour, after which we'll have questions from attendees. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and our chat moderator will keep track of them for the Q&A session afterwards. You can also use the chat box to let us know about any technical problems that you think may be originating on our end. Finally, in the chat box, we've dropped a URL to our link tree, which includes links for our social media channels and the land acknowledgement and action statement and links. And one final note, as I mentioned, we'll be recording this presentation and sharing it with registered participants on our YouTube channel. We'll talk more about those details at the end of the session. If you would rather not be recorded, please feel free to turn off your camera function at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Okay, so today we're honored to welcome Emma Kent telling us about, did you know you can do that using this? How I utilize social media platforms to teach information literacy, followed by Johannah White presenting Going Back to the Well, refreshing your approach to IL instruction. Miss Emma Kent has been a librarian for the last 12 years. She has degrees in library and information science, liberal studies with an emphasis in philosophy, and an MFA in creative writing. Currently, Ms. Kent is an assistant professor and university librarian for access and innovation at Grambling State University. Ms. Kent has worked as a senior librarian for New York State Community and Corrections and the Hilton Library at the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park, New York. She says she has never seen so many cookbooks in her life. And the Media Library in Village Voice, where she has published several articles, and several other small public libraries in Connecticut and upstate and downstate New York. She loves it when her students tell her that because of you, I've learned something new today. Miss Kent loves words. She states that when Jay-Z used the word vehemently in rap, it blew her mind. And Miss Kent loves all things Marvel, Harry Potter, Matilda the musical, and K-dramas. So if you're ready, Miss Kent, we can go ahead and get started.
Good morning. And good morning from Grambling State University. And thank you all for allowing me to be here this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to present at this Information Literacy Forum. And I am going to get started sharing my screen. Okay, so this is, of course, we know this is all Charlie Brown, and who doesn't love a Snoopy character? And so most of the time people ask, everybody see my screen, right? Hello?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so most of the time as librarians, people think we do one thing when we do something else. So as you can see here, these are librarians who, this is what my family think I do, this is what my friends think I do, this is what society thinks I do, but we know we do more than just shelf books. So we are librarians. We're not Conan the librarian, we are the original search engine librarians. We are, lost my thought. So we are all of these things and more. And so at the end of the day, this is what we do when I get home. And when you get home, most of the time, I'm sure, especially as hot as it's been outside. Why are you a librarian? If you can answer this question in the chat, that would be so wonderful. Why are you a librarian? I know I'm a librarian because I love talking to people. I love sharing information with people. I love it when people are just absolutely happy when they found a resource that they can use to write a paper, or they can use the information that I've shared to give them, to help them find other resources that they can use to write a paper or do a presentation. So, librarians like to gather. We have all types of conferences and workshops and things that to help us do instruction. And so I recently attended a forum with Priya Parker, and she has a book called The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters. And so the way we gather matters. As instructors, we usually gather in classrooms, or we gather online with our students, or we gather with other librarians. And today's forum is a way for us to gather and find out new information. Why do you teach? This is another question. There is a difference between teaching and doing instruction. And so I'm going to share a video with you guys that I wanted you guys to see. What is the purpose of instruction? That's another thing that Ms. Parker discussed. Why do we teach? What is the purpose of instructions? And why am I a librarian? So when Ms. Parker was giving her presentation, she asked us to close our eyes. And so while I was sitting there, I was thinking, why does she want us to close our eyes? Like, can we not think with our eyes open? Can we not function with our eyes open? And sometimes these are the kinds of thoughts, I'm sure, that are going through our students' mind when we ask them to participate. Like, why does she want me to participate? So I am going to share that video with you guys. So this video that I'm going to show, okay. Can everybody see this video?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Emma, I'm not seeing or hearing the video. I'm just seeing the static YouTube image. You may have to switch your screen share to the YouTube page.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back out here. And let's see if we can. I'm gonna share it again. We always have this problem. To the YouTube page and share. Let's try this again. Can you see it now?
No, still the static
Mm.
image.
Okay. Stop sharing that. And here. If not, you know, technical difficulty is a thing for real.
I believe you'll want to switch to share your screen of like a web browser with the YouTube video pulled up in it. I think that's what's causing the issue. I could be wrong, but I believe that's
No, you
what's
might be
hold
right.
up.
Let me see if I can. Okay, tell me when you can see this. Not yet?
No.
Now?
No, we see you.
Hi.
You're beautiful. Look at little
Thank
YouTube, though.
you. Okay, you know what? Okay, I'm just gonna talk this through because I love this video. This was a video that I saw on like one of the social media platforms, either YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. I can't remember which one, but can you still see my PowerPoint?
No, Emma, I don't think you're currently sharing anything at the moment.
Okay. So we'll go out of here. And it's okay. If it doesn't work, I can talk because I'm really good at talking. So go back here. Let me try here. It's my last time. Can you see it now?
Yes, the video is available now.
Okay, and
Jerk.
can you hear it?
My
Yes.
asthma. They said they'd fix it, but it didn't make any difference at all.
Well, sometimes doctors make mistakes. Anna, you need to try twice as hard to fix them. Are you using your inhaler?
All the time. Go through one a week.
You sure you're using it right?
Do I look like an idiot?
No. Why don't you show me how your inhaler works?
And that is the difference between teaching and instruction. So what happened here is someone did not give her great instructions. So there was a teaching moment that could have happened, but it didn't happen because the instruction part of it was, okay, here's an inhaler. This is how, it wasn't like, here's an inhaler. This is how you use it. It was like, here, this is an inhaler. And we assume that she knew how to use it. And so this is the difference between instruction. When we're talking to our students, sometimes they might not understand everything that we're sharing with them. So those teaching moments happen when we think that a student might know something when they really don't. And so with this video, I thought it was so great. I thought it was a perfect way to segue right into the aspect of the different types of social media that I use to do instruction and to do information literacy. And so with this video, her using her inhaler, thinking that all I need to do is just spray it on my throat, and then that would be the thing that helps me. But again, someone missed a very important teaching moment there, where so I love that video, and I just wanted to share it, and I'm glad I got an opportunity to share that with you. Does anybody have any questions or want to make a comment about that video as far as teaching and instruction goes? Please feel free to make a comment in the chat. Okay, so we're going back to what is the purpose of instruction. The purpose of instruction is to give good information to our students, or so that they understand that we're not here to always just, well, we are here for purposes of doing instructions and showing you how to find good resources. And that's my main goal, is to make sure that our students find really good resources so that they can write a paper, do a good presentation. And so Google says that our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. I absolutely love Google. I use Google. This word Google can be taught in a business class for marketing. Google has a really good marketing, the way they market their name, not even just their brand, but the name Google is a good tool to use in a business class. The word Google is a good marketing tool to use as a graphic design in a graphic design class. And so you can use this word in just about any aspect that that you teach. Also in art class, Google has an art contest that they do with middle school and high school students. And so again, there is a, excuse me, move that. So Arthur C. Brooks at The Atlantic doesn't agree with me. Arthur said that Google is in grad school. We absolutely should know that. He also says that the internet has created an explosion of nonsense. Again, a good teaching and instruction moment with Google is to make sure that our students understand the difference between Google, that is a search engine in a company, and the internet is a network of networks. It's a way for Google to put its platform on so that we can search different types of what is autism, what is social media, what is Chat GPT, what is AI. So Mr. Brooks also says having so much information at our fingertips is useful but seductive, easily fooling us into thinking that we know way more than we do. How many of you as librarians think you know way more than you do? You can put 1 for I do, or 2 for I don't, or 3 for I know everything. Another type of search engine is Microsoft Office offers us the search engine Bing. I absolutely love Bing. I think it's a really another way to do a search. Whenever I'm having an instructional class and I'm giving information, Bing is a very good tool to use when I want to try something other. I want the students to try something other than Google. And so because most of us have Microsoft Office or Microsoft 365, Bing is just another form, another platform for doing a search. Pinterest. How many of you have Pinterest? Put in the chat 1 if you do, 2 if you don't. This is my Pinterest board. Can everybody see it?
Hi, Emma. You're not currently sharing your screen.
It's not. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Haley. Okay, can everybody see the board?
I currently see a slide with the Pinterest logo on there. I'm not seeing the actual board.
Another thing, this is why practicing in Google is, this is why practice is good. Have to go. And you only get 30 minutes, so you have to. Now, Haley,
Still the slide, what I believe.
okay. All right. Well, all of the great videos that I wanted to share with you, I'm not able to share it, but I can tell you about it. So Pinterest is a really great tool to use when I do visual and performing arts. I usually use Pinterest because I do have pictures. So what I do on Pinterest is I take the pictures and I create bulletin boards with them. I give the students ways to if I'm having a writing class, I ask them to describe something. I'll give them a picture and I ask them to write something about the picture. In the creative writing class. And so again, I use Pinterest for almost everything. I use it to create bulletin boards. I use Pinterest to for nursing classes. I use it as anatomy. In Pinterest, you can go in and put the bones of the body. So for nurses, I'll tell them like create a Pinterest board for yourself so that you can learn the bones of the body or learn what's the different types of cells. And so Pinterest has tons of information that you can use to teach a class. For my visual and performing arts class, I usually use that for to show them different types of faces, like this face for interest. I use different types of faces because they have to do makeup. And so the professor in that class, she always want her students to use that different type. I use Marvel. I use YouTube to show the different types of faces that you can make up for Marvel. There's lots of websites that you can go to. There's videos that you can use to show different types of makeup. I really wanted to show you the YouTube page. I'm gonna try it one more time before my time is up and see if I can actually take you to Pinterest, because I am gonna go to Pinterest as a, let me see if I can go to Pinterest from just the website itself. Let's see here, let's try this one. Okay, can you see Pinterest now?
Yes.
Oh, excellent, because it's such a fantastic,
Yay.
yeah, it's such a fantastic thing to use. Okay, so I have boards that are, this is Professor Jones's class. And these are visual and performing arts. This is makeup that I show her. Her class when I usually do a face-to-face with her. So most of the time she want me to show wounds, but all of this is makeup. And so monsters and so she usually shows, there's so many different types of faces and I love it. And so this is the visual and performing arts class that I usually use this board for. Okay. And then I have a librarian's board where I show many reasons you need your librarian, which is very important. Just a plethora of information that you can go into Pinterest. I create these boards. How do you cite? This is a big deal. When do you cite? When do you not cite? And so I use Pinterest to put tons of information. And again, you can print these out and you can share them with your classes. Go to another one, my last one, information about information. So these are all information boards. Sometimes I teach a career class, how to write a resume. LinkedIn is a really important social media page that I use. So Pinterest can be used for so many things. If you have a fashion class, I use coupling of clothes. It shows different types of clothes to put together. For fashion students, I used to work, when I lived in New York, I worked at a fashion college. And so this was a perfect board for that. Oh, I'm so glad you got a chance to see this. So Pinterest can be used, like I said, for many, many reasons, different things that you want to share. Cooking classes, if you have a cooking class that you want to do in the library, there are so many different types of recipes and foods and things like that. I love using Pinterest to do instruction. Creative writing, there's lots of great quotes for using creative writing. And that's Pinterest. And so I'm going to stop sharing again. Oh, yay, you got to see that. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you got a chance to see that. And so for the most part, it's just, again, I use YouTube, I use Google, I use Bing, Pinterest, I use TED Talks. Lizzo has a really great TED Talk that she shares. Her TED Talk is about twerking, believe it or not. I use that in an English class that I taught. So TED Talks are really, really great. They're informative, they are professional, and you can use TED Talks in lots of classes. I use it in my English class, I use it in my history classes. And of course, the wonderful, wonderful LinkedIn. I am liaison to the Visual and Performing Arts, but I also am on the Faculty Senate at Grambling State University. And so we have a career section. And so at the career office, I think LinkedIn is a valuable social media tool to use with your students when they're looking for jobs, when they want to know, like, what kind of job can I do with this degree? And that's what LinkedIn does. It helps you to kind of make connections. And so I love it. So LinkedIn, TED Talks, Pinterest, Bing, Google, all of these things I use to share information with the students. That's pretty much it. I'm sorry that all of my videos and things took so long to get to the point of like, okay, let's share this, but I'm glad you got a chance to see Pinterest, which I was really hoping that you would. And so I'm pretty much done. I think I am, Haley.
Yes, thank you, Emma, for your engaging presentation. Like I said before, we'll save questions until our Q&A time after the next presentation. I know we got at least a couple questions in the chat, but thank you so much, Emma. And now we'll have Johannah White with Going Back to the Well, refreshing your approach to IL instruction. And so a little bit about Ms. White. She is currently the Information Instruction Librarian at the University of New Orleans. She has been teaching since 2007 and is a graduate of the ACRL Immersion Program in 2014. In addition to teaching IL, she has also become deeply interested in working with faculty on OER, Open Educational Resource Projects, since 2018. Also in 2019, she graduated from the SPARC Open Education Leadership Program and has worked on a variety of OER projects with Lewis, LOUIS, and at Xavier University of Louisiana, Baton Rouge Community College, and now at the University of New Orleans. So thank you so much for joining us, Johannah, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Miss Haley. Appreciate it. So this morning, I wanted to have a discussion. So for me, this is a think piece, and it won't be quite as visually compelling as Miss Kent's beautiful presentation. Thank you, Emma, for that very awesome presentation. Don't loll at me, Emma. I see you. So this morning, what I really wanted to talk about is sometimes I do presentations because the topic is really interesting to me and I'm looking for other people to click with. So indulge me, if you will. So one of the things that has been on my mind is how to refresh my approach to instruction. And these are all, I suppose, very self-centered, self-referential measures in terms of finding insights to your own process, finding bits of inspiration that apply to your teaching and your situation with whatever student populations you deal with on a regular basis. So really, this is what I wanted to talk about today, and that's my motivation. Is we often start out our careers with a big burst of enthusiasm, and as we continue, sometimes that enthusiasm wanes, and we look for ways to renew ourselves. However, if you spend any time in a classroom, you realize this is really a communal endeavor, and so you can't just always make this up yourself, right? Sometimes you do need feedback or witness from others. So what I want to talk about is some of the ways to get some of that feedback, get some of that witness, and create your own methods, your own process for finding those insights. So I'm going to share my screen. 1 second here. And you should see a very boring black and white LibGuide that is not fancy in any way, shape, or form. So what I really wanted to do there was to just put out, the basic kinds of questions and talk around them. So welcome, thanks for coming in and being part of my little community for this good half hour. My goal today is really that one of these suggestions could possibly provide you with some needed insight, assurance or reassurance, inspiration, or even a wild hair of an idea. So without further ado, my first suggestion, something that sometimes works for me, is as librarians we're often, or IL librarians, we're often very quizzy, right? There are pre-quizzes, sometimes there's post-quizzes, sometimes they get graded, sometimes they are just formative. And reflection, of course, is a big piece. If you go through any of the ACRL materials or even immersion, reflection is always the order of the day. So sometimes that's just kind of sitting with yourself and asking those questions and maybe even writing it out if that is what your process is like. So one thing that I think about is giving myself a quiz at the end of a session, and it's a half quiz, half kind of gut check to say, where am I really at with this? So the one thing, I don't know how you all form your lessons, but I use a formal lesson plan, and I plan, usually at least 2 learning activities, sometimes 3, depending on the length of the session, and there'll be an outcome tied to each of those activities at a minimum. So what I want to know is, according to my lesson plan, did I stay on track? Did I teach to my outcomes? We all know that things happen, right? The internet goes out. Somebody changes the links in your catalog. There's a fire alarm. There are all kinds of things that can happen during a session. Some of them are really good things, like a student raises their hand, asks a question, and it provides you with a terrific springboard in order to go off and talk about one of your concepts. But you lose time when you do that, right? So it may be that something else needs to be dropped farther on down the line in your lesson plan because you accommodated this opportunity in medias res during your session. So some good things can actually, interrupt your flow, but you just need to check in with yourself and go, did I really teach to my outcomes? Yeah. If not, what happened, right? Did something great happen? Did something not so great happen? Sometimes you just have to accommodate that reality, but it's also good to say, this is what happened to me in the future. Is there anything I can do to avoid some of those circumstances? Fire alarms you can't do anything about, but sometimes those good opportunities, like a student asks you the right question at the right time. Is there anything I can do to capitalize on that opportunity next time around? Like have an example, think of an example that goes with that kind of concept that I can have in case there's real interest in it. Yeah, so thinking about just even one thing that you could do differently, depending on what happened during a given session, is actually a productive thought exercise for you. Another thing that I always worry about is, for me, it's student engagement and hitting those outcomes. That's the reason I reflect on what my practice is. So I want to know, did I achieve a high level of student engagement, and was I able to maintain it? As we all know, sometimes the energy kind of ebbs and flows, interest ebbs and flows. It may be that you have a really strong introduction, and maybe your first learning activity, you don't have all the quirks worked out. You don't have all the kinks worked out, or you run into a tech problem. And so attention begins to falter because we're waiting for, I don't know, a link to resolve. Yeah. And it's taking forever because, oh, that's a bad link. Right. Now you've got to back out, find another example to use, in your session. And sometimes energy can falter. Sometimes you can lose people during those junctures. So again, it's about thinking, it's about complimenting yourself in some ways to say, at what points did I have really good engagement, and what points did I have less engagement, right? What prompted that fall in engagement? And is there anything, again, that I can do to mediate that or remediate that next time around? Right. So it's all of those, it's all of those kinds of questions that need to be asked. And you're the only one who can ask those. Yeah. Nobody else can prompt you to do it, or because they haven't seen what you've seen, they don't have all the answers. The last one is the real gut check question. How do I feel about my own session? Right. Was I comfortable? Was I happy with it? Was I satisfied with the response that I got? Did I enjoy the discussion? There's a question for you. Did I enjoy it? Did my students enjoy it? Yeah. So sometimes we get really busy, hitting all of our marks. We are frog marching people through the session. And now we don't have time to look anymore at that. Let's go on to the next thing. Let's go on to the next activity. Sometimes there's a bend in the road and you got to take the turn, and sometimes you push through, but it's a judgment call. So whatever judgment call you make, check in with yourself to say, was I satisfied with the call that I made during my session? Yeah. So the quiz and the self-reflection might be an interesting piece for you to do. And again, this is right after your session when it's still very fresh in your mind. So another thing that I do at the end of my sessions is I give students a quick online survey. Usually it's 3 to 5 questions, no more. I don't know what kinds of summative assessment or formative assessment that other folks are using. I do lots of formative in terms of question and answer or observation. I'll observe students as they search and walk around and speak to as many as possible who are searching. But I do like to give them some kind of a survey piece at the end, both so that they feel heard and so that I get a little bit of feedback on, did I hit some of my outcomes? Could they create a search? Do they seem to have a basic grasp of what a peer-reviewed article is and why it's different from a popular article? Yeah, so that kind of thing. So no matter what questions you are asking in your survey, I like to grab those surveys at the end of my class and have a look at them. So you don't have to do this after, every session, but I would say just pick one. So there's a couple themes here. You can pick one that you do over and over again. For example, I do freshman English again and again. So I'm definitely going to pick on a freshman English class. It may be that I only do one in a particular other discipline, like I've done one chemistry class, right? That might be an interesting session to kind of check in with myself and do some assessment with. But no matter what you choose, something that's rare, something that is common, something that went beautifully, something that had some real challenges for you, no matter which one you choose, have a look at those surveys right after you're finished. Again, so that this is fresh in your mind, right? So you can see their faces, you remember some names, you're remembering what people are saying. So no matter what questions are on your assessment, ask yourself, do I have any proof that the class achieved one or more of my learning outcomes? We all say the proof is in the pudding. Administrators like pudding. Yeah, administrators like to know there's some kind of proof. So rather than just yeah, I really feel that, students understood it, they are also looking for some kind of measures of proof, right? So a quiz that asks them to fill in a word, fill in a phrase, make up a search, something that demonstrates to outsiders that those students understood a concept. That's that proof piece. You're also looking for proof. If I taught or tried to teach 3 target learning outcomes in a session, I'm looking for proof, hopefully, that I at least hit 2 of them, right? That's my personal goal. 2 out of 3 is to make sure that I can have some kind of evidence that says I have achieved this. Yeah, and sometimes all your inquiry does is prove that you have not hit those learning outcomes, and that is as good an insight as yes, I did. The other thing is, again, harping on student engagement. If you don't have engagement, if you don't have attention, if you don't have eyeballs, if you don't have goodwill, then you don't have much, right? So what kind of approaches are we using? How are we speaking to our students? Are we using library jargon? Are we trying to demystify library jargon as we talk about this? Are you friendly? Are you approachable? Do you speak to them before as they're filing into your classroom? Do you talk to them before? Do you notice something about them, whether it's their backpack, their sweatshirt, what teams they're supporting, what student group they're a part of? Are you responding and talking to them and showing them that you see them as they are, even though they've never seen you before because you're a brand new instructor for them in a one-shot setting? So again, looking for engagement, looking for some kind of proof that a learning outcome has been achieved. Sometimes when you go through this and you hit your surveys, we all have doubts about ourselves as instructors. We are vulnerable when we are up there teaching in a class. And sometimes we learn that we make a better impression on people than we had imagined. And that is also really valuable. That is encouraging, that is refreshing, that is kindness. And sometimes we find, or sometimes I certainly find that given my freshmen, they still have some of that childlike kindness that they're willing to extend even to a new instructor, a strange person that they don't know. And that can be awfully encouraging when you read those comments that they have left in your class. Oh, Miss Hannah was really great. I really enjoyed it. Or I learned 2 new things today and I had no idea that the library was that cool, right? So you will hear these things, no doubt I have already heard these things, but again, it's also good to check in and get that little pat on the back, that little nice bit of reassurance that says, yeah, they understand, I see them, and they see me in return, right? So that's actually part of how you can use your surveys and reinterpret them in a different way that works for you, rather than just the summative piece of I had 15 students, they belong to a particular discipline, they're led by a certain other instructor, and half of them understood how to construct a keyword search. Yes. So those are also good stats, but you need some kind of interpretation of that assessment in order to keep you going. And that's the value I find in sort of reinterpreting those class surveys. There isn't enough time, and I know, all of us are very, very busy doing instruction. So this is a bit like eating the proverbial elephant. You do it bite by bite. I wouldn't recommend doing, taking all of these methods and throwing them at one class after. I would pick one of these, right? Do a little quiz, do a little self-reflection after one class, or grab those surveys and do your own reinterpretation of the data that is on those surveys, right? To feed your own need. And I would probably focus in on one issue at a time. So for me, that's often student engagement. What evidence do I have that students were engaged? Because in my view, if you don't have the student engagement piece going, hitting your learning outcomes is going to be really difficult. So for me, that's usually the most important part. The third piece that I like to do is observation. And sometimes observation can be a little bit of a fraught topic for some folks. Oftentimes there's some anxiety around instructors being observed. Sometimes it's part of a formal job evaluation. I find that has rarely been the case, but it could be. Informal observation, when you ask maybe another librarian to do it, could be very useful. So you got two tacks to take on this one. One is you offer to observe another librarian if they want some feedback about the engagement piece, right? So I'm not going to watch your class with a view towards, how many learning outcomes you have or how cool your activities are. I'm going to be watching student engagement levels for you during this session, right? I'm going to check in with students at the introduction. I'm going to watch them engage with an activity or not engage with the activity, depending, and I'm going to make notes for you during that class to say, you were strong throughout here, and then it sort of faltered at this point. Maybe there's some things we can brainstorm for you to keep that level of engagement high for longer during that session. Sometimes that is really, really helpful. Sometimes watching someone else do it is helpful for you because it's informal feedback on your own practice. Sometimes finding somebody else to observe you is a bit of a sticky wicket. So if you have some friends who are teaching assistants, for example, again, I work with freshman English a lot here and at Xavier. And so I know a bunch of adjunct instructors, and sometimes they hang around the library and I'll say, hey, come sit in. Give me a little feedback on places where, I could keep that attention strong, during my session. That's something where you get to benefit from somebody else's experience. So I do a lot of one-shots. Those adjuncts, they're with those students 3 times a week for 16 weeks, right? They see them 48 times or up to 48 times. They have some things to offer about engagement, and it would be worth hearing. So that's something I would suggest. Another fun person who can actually sometimes give you some good feedback is another student. So a student worker. If you can persuade one of your colleagues to give you a student worker for an hour, you can have them sit in your class and ask them to answer some specific questions about the session, right? So that might be another thing where you're like, all right, I want to work on a particular activity or tied to a certain learning outcome. So I want the student to pay attention to the directions. Were they clear? Do they think that they could follow those directions? Did they see students in the class follow those directions, or was there some faltering, right? Was there some miscommunication or misunderstanding? Was there a technical problem that students don't understand how to breach, how to conquer? Maybe I need to know that, or I'm not so aware of that in my teaching practice, and I need to take another step and explain something else in order to help students, with that activity. So that can be useful actually from a student perspective. So a student worker, a TA, another colleague are other folks who can actually help you, but you do need to give them something very specific to observe. So something specific, something measurable, hopefully something actionable and realistic. So there's that SMART acronym out there in the world. So give them a SMART goal to try to evaluate you on. And of course, I add kind, which stands for nothing except being kind to people, and give positive feedback wherever possible and natural to do. So I will say that given your own request for feedback should be focused and limited to the number of elements that you're teaching, and it should be no greater than the number of learning activities that are observed in the class. So if you've got 3 learning activities, don't ask your observer to do 5 things, right? Observe on 5 different things, no more than 3 in that case. And I like to limit it to just 1, right? Please focus in on engagement. Here are the things I'd like to know, right? So that they can give you something specific. That's actually really, really useful. And if you, for example, had an evaluation that evaluated everything that you do in your session, you get so much feedback. It would be a real trial to have to go through it and come up with something actionable for every piece that you were evaluated on. So again, eat the elephant 1 bite at a time and focus in on an aspect that you want to know more about, right? Or the one you want to know the most about. So that's actually what I would recommend there. Are we getting close? 5 minutes? Okay. These are some of my favorite ideas. These, I think, work, and at least 2 of them are things that you can control, right? Doing the quiz after class, doing the reflection, or reevaluating your class surveys. Observation, obviously, you need another partner, some cooperation in order to do something like that. Another technique or idea that might give you some inspiration or renewal, thinking about your class, is what I call intersectionality, or the intersectionality of our students. Once upon a time, I went to a fantastic lecture by a visiting lecturer at Xavier, and she wanted to talk about the various categories of student experience. And these categories were what we often call the labels of types of students, right? So we talk about first-gen students, we talk about non-native speakers, we talk about students who are differently abled or need an accommodation. And everybody in this lecture hall that all the faculty gathered were like, oh, yeah, definitely yes. And I have a feeling that I don't know what this woman meant until she actually gave us an example. And so she said, imagine a student in your class. She's first generation, she's Latina, and she's pregnant. She's starting a family. So this is the intersectionality, right? All those things intersect in one person. And all of a sudden the penny drops for everybody in the room, and they go, oh yeah, these are my students, right? We don't think very well in those categories, but when you personalize it and say, these are the intersections that make up this particular human being who is a student in front of me, we all suddenly understand, right? It may be that you have a returning veteran who's 30 years old, and he's in your freshman English class sitting there with students who are 17 and straight out of high school. His experience is really radically different from that 17-year-old. Both in terms of time and experience and geography and learning, right? And maturity. So these are the real intersections that our students typically inhabit. One of the issues here is that if you're doing one-shots, like I find myself doing, you don't have very much time to learn about your students. So what you do is you preload it. You talk to their instructors, you email them, you pick up the phone and call them, and you say, tell me about your students, preferably without naming names, right? I don't need to know that this one is Sarah and that one is Nabila and that one is Tyrone. I need to know that one of those is a returning veteran. One of those, I have 3 non-native speakers in my class. Yeah. I need to know that maybe one of them is pregnant and one of them has an accommodation. I don't need to know which ones. I'll figure it out. I'm a bright girl. Right? But I need to know they're there, because that might help me key my approach to more of those students. Yeah. I'll give you an example. Oh, 5 minutes. I'll give you an example. One fall semester, I was deep into my teaching, and I had taught for English, and I had taught for psychology, and I had taught for sociology. And I noticed something terrible. Of all the paper projects that I was asked to come in and do a session to help prepare students for, in Soc, in Psych, and in English, I noticed a common paper topic, which was the school to prison pipeline for African Americans. I saw this in English class, I saw it in a psych class, I saw it in a sociology class. I will bet my bottom dollar that at least there's one student who is in all of those classes and has the chance to sadly recycle their work on that topic. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of being a majority teacher in a minority classroom. But it matters what you say. It matters what kinds of examples you show those students. It matters what the tonality of your topic is. And I hated to tell my professors this, but school to prison pipeline for African Americans is a real downer of a topic. It's just incredibly negative. And yes, we need to prepare students for the negative, but when they see it again and again and again over the course of one semester, like those students who might have been in the psych, the soc, and the English class, guess what? That sends them a really negative message that this is what there is to study about, for example, African Americans. And I decided I hated that. But as good little librarians, we are not supposed to rebel against our instructors. Yeah, we can't tell them that. So I eventually did tell my psych professor because he seemed like he was open to it. So I took that school to prison pipeline topic that I was supposed to be helping prepare them for, and I flipped it on its head. So in Psych Info or Soc Index, for example, I did searches on African Americans, males, academic achievements, and college students, right? Or I took at college students and factors that impact success, right? I did other kinds of searches that illuminate the other half of that topic area, the positive side of that topic area, right? Helping them see what kinds of factors help African American students achieve that kind of success and avoid that school to prison pipeline. Yeah, so that they can take that topic and turn it into a much more positive experience, something that they might actually want to remember, as opposed to, oh, I don't want to think about all those downer topics I had to do in school. Yeah. How many of us have put aside assignments that we really just didn't like? It wasn't positive, it wasn't uplifting, it wasn't interesting enough, or I'd seen it more than once. Students tend to put those things aside and want to forget them. So I wanted to try to flip that one over. And for example, that's something I learned from thinking about the intersectionality of my students and paying attention to what my instructors wanted to put out. So that's just something. Intersectionality is an absolutely enormous topic, and I'm not doing it justice here, but I wanted to mention it because talking to your instructors in advance, especially when you're in that one-shot situation, is incredibly useful to say, who am I going to meet? What kinds of student experience am I going to encounter for that 50-minute session or for that 75-minute session? And that can help give you a leg up in terms of your preparation. So I just want to put that out there, that might be a useful thing to consider when you're looking for renewal, when you're looking for some inspiration to bring into your classroom, to kind of flip that script. It always makes you feel better. And you find that, for example, when I flipped that topic around, flipped it to something positive, I got more positive feedback in the room teaching that than I did compared to teaching school to prison pipeline and doing this kind of search in Psych Info, for example. Yeah. So just doing that changes the temperature in your classroom, right? In terms of engagement, attention, positive retention of the material that you go over. So I just want to put that out there. A few final thoughts. So teaching really is about balancing the tension between developing techniques, developing approaches that you're comfortable with, that you get some good results with, you hit your outcomes, you do get some student engagement with, and that need for renewal, right? Keeping yourself fresh. Whether it's changing up topics, changing up approaches, changing up types of materials, changing up the searches that you do, the language that you might use, to keep that fresh for yourself and your students. Because ultimately there's also another, there's an energy that gets traded back and forth in the room. Yeah. As you put things out, you get a response to it, or you put something out and you get a negative response to it. I feel like it's less common for people in our profession to talk about how to keep growing as a teacher. So just by default, I have kind of thought about these things and tried to do them and try to find ways to keep feeding myself, keep nourishing myself as a teacher. So I just wanted to share them to see if other folks are doing some other activities to nourish themselves and grow as teachers, to renew their own approaches. I offer this if this is useful. If there's even one useful thing in it, I would be pretty thrilled. That would be great. I find that the longer I go into my career, there are fewer mileposts than there were in the beginning, right? As far as marks to hit and things to do and things to achieve. But I really hope that at least one of these ideas resonates with y'all. And if none of them do, that's fine too. But I think maybe just the idea of taking time to check in with yourself and your own teaching practice, again, that self-reflection piece can be really, really useful, and you can do it in 10 minutes after a class. So I hope I gave you some questions to ask, at least for that. I just want to thank you for your time and your attention today. And I have to say, at the beginning of our semester, I salute and support you, all you teaching librarians, and I wish you a wonderful fall semester. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Emma, for y'all's thoughtful insights. So now we'll shift to the Q&A section of this session to see what questions we've gotten in the chat box.
Okay, I have one for Emma. I worry about Pinterest and licensing/copyright. How do you talk to students about compiling the work of others for inspiration?
So to me, Pinterest is more like a big scrapbook. And so because so many people post and share information and share pictures and share ideas, and so I don't really worry too much about the copyright aspect of it in that regard. If they're using Pinterest to just help them to study the bones of the body, or if they're using Pinterest just to show different types of faces in a visual and performing arts class, I really don't think that is violating any types of copyright laws in that regard. So the way that I just show them boards and tell them how to use Pinterest, and a lot of students have Pinterest, but they never really use Pinterest. They use other images if they're going to do so. For the most part, the students that I show the Pinterest page to are the visual and performing arts students and maybe the nursing students. For TED Talks, I use it's for a whole different class. So I don't really worry too much about the copyright issues and things like that because it's not being misused. So does that help a little bit? Okay, Emily, thank you for the question.
Hannah, this next one's for you. We had a few people wanting your LibGuide. I see you've shared that. Another question is, do you share the results of surveys with other library team members? Or are you just a solo instruction machine?
I'm not a solo librarian. There's some other teaching librarians here. What I usually do is I gather my stats in the more conventional way to say, there are X number of students and X number of, departments served. If people are interested, I'm happy to tell them about the comments that I get, like, I thought this was boring and terrible, or why is there a fire drill in the middle of my session? It all got blown up. Or I thought my librarian was great and I had no idea we had this many databases. I'm happy to share that. The question is, would it be useful for folks? Most of my other teaching librarians teach, I basically do freshmen, and so they teach the levels above. Oh, who's the brave person who does TikTok in their instruction?
Oh, I do. So I love TikTok, but you can find me on TikTok with other students because they'll come and say, Miss Ken, can you jump in my TikTok? I'm like, yeah. So I'm, jumping in TikToks and everything. TikTok is not something I actually use as part of an instruction. What I use TikTok for is to find ideas to do instruction, if that makes sense. So I'll take a TikTok video like the Cuff It video. I really love that video. And so I'll go to students and I was like, hey, I'm the librarian. You want to be in my Cuff It video? And so, so this is how I use TikTok. I don't actually use TikTok as a means of instruction while doing instruction. What I use TikTok for is to learn different things, to new ideas to share. That's what I use TikTok for. Thanks, Carla, for that question. Emily, you do too.
I got a question. For example, does anybody have any sort of assessment piece that they use for themselves just to reflect on what you do or what you've done in a session?
I'm going to answer for myself. What I do, I was sharing in the chat that the HR department actually sent out peer review for each one of the professors to peer review another professor. So I got all of the professors that I teach, do instructions for them to actually do a peer review for me, which works out perfect for me. There are some things that, when you're doing instructions, the professors are usually in the class too. So it was really good for them to say, okay, Ms. Kent, this is what I've observed. This is what I think. For myself, I usually try to write down things that, like today, I had a whole script that I was going to use to do this presentation. And just talking, when you're actually doing a presentation online, it's a little different from doing it face to face. So I write myself notes to say, okay, you forgot your whole script. Did you forget your whole script? And so for me, it helps me because the next time it's like, okay, use your script. Don't forget, this is important because there are things that I miss having a conversation about. So I do make myself notes in that regard.
Does everybody have their instructors present when they do a session?
That seems to be hit or miss. Maybe 60-40, maybe 60% of the time the instructor's present, 40% they're not.
Mostly all of my professors are there in the class because they have to take attendance and they want to make sure that their students are there. There was a communication journalism class I taught, and the professors send their students to me as opposed to him being in the classroom. And I think that was the only time a professor was not in the class, except when I did the online classes for a history professor, and I had 4 sessions with his class and he was not there.
One thing that I know works for me, and I'll just share it in case I'm sure some folks are doing it and some folks might not be, is when my instructor is present, and I basically require them to be present. I ask them to introduce me. And the point of asking them to introduce me is a transfer of authority, because I'm a new person coming into their class. The students don't know me. And I basically have to hit the ground running and cover a bunch of material. So I asked for that transfer of authority, and that gets accomplished with that introduction. So for me, that's why I asked about, are your instructors present? Thanks.
Okay, is that all of our questions, Angie?
Yes, ma'am. That's all the chat.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Hannah and Emma again for sharing those insights with us today. So that's all of our sessions for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And we hope you'll be back for our remaining sessions of our Information Literacy Forum for the remainder of the week. Just to remind you, we're going to be dropping a link for our social media channels into the chat. We're also dropping the link to an evaluation form to get feedback on presentations. If you would be so kind, please fill out this form so that we can know what worked and prepare for next year's forum. And finally, if you'd like to rewatch today's presentations, we'll be posting recordings to our YouTube channel. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at NOLA, NOLAILC @gmail.com. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day.